Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. First of all, I want to acknowledge our partners, Fulton County Sheriff Patrick Labat, Georgia State Patrol, who will be joining us today as we talk about some of our other initiatives. But the first topic of conversation is clearly around crime, which I know is always at top of mind when I'm having conversation with the media. So as we begin the beginning of this year, right now, we're down in every category as it relates to crime, with the exception of homicide. And so today's first conversation will be around what we're doing in that space. Homicide is the only crime that continues to drive us currently. It's very typical of what we saw last year. The individuals tend to have some type of a relationship, and the primary reason that we are seeing this is escalating arguments. And so we have the team here today so that we can do a deeper dive in that conversation as it relates to what we're doing and seeing as it relates to homicide. Our Criminal Investigation Division is led by Chief Hampton, as well as our Major Crime Section, which is Major Peak, and then Ralph Woolfolk is the lieutenant over the Homicide Unit. We'll be glad to go into the conversations and let you know exactly where we are as it relates to I know you have questions around some of the homicides that are outstanding. We'll talk as much as we possibly can about those to give you insights on that. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Chief Hampton.
Again, good afternoon. Charles Hampton, Jr., Deputy Chief of Criminal Investigation Division. So one of the units under Criminal Investigation Units is the homicide. Again, Lieutenant Woolfolk will talk a little bit more, but it has been challenging this year. This year we're currently sitting at 24 homicides. As Chief Bryant just said, a majority of those are as a result of escalated disputes. And again, it's just reminiscent of those individuals not being able to resolve conflict in a peaceful manner. We're seeing a lot of guns on the street. We're seeing guns being stolen out of vehicles. And so, again, my plea is just asking for gun owners to be responsible. Lock your guns up. We will talk briefly about an incident as early this morning that we went out on with a 9-year-old. But guns inside residence, getting in the hands of children. In the past 4 months, we have investigated 4 deaths involving children under the age of 10. And it's tough. It's tough to investigate any sudden death regarding homicide, but it's especially troubling for our men and women assigned to homicide to investigate a child. And so my plea, again, is that if you're going to be a gun owner, we ask you to just be a responsible gun owner. Lock it up, take the necessary precautions, and help us. But again, I would end that I would stack my homicide team against any homicide team. So currently we are sitting at 24. Just the clearance rate of just for those are about 50% right now. So we are doing a great job. The men and women work tirelessly to try to bring closure to the victim's family. And again, that's oftentimes leaving their homes in the middle of the night, missing their own children's birthdays, graduations, anniversaries. But we are here, we're committed to do the job that we have sworn to do. And so if anyone has any thoughts of committing a crime of homicide, we're going to do our job. We also have a cold case component of homicide, so we may not get it right away, but we are committed. And again, Lieutenant Woolfolk would probably mention about another case that we spoke about earlier this year, several years later, and able to bring closure to a family. So we don't stop, and we will do our due diligence to bring some type of closure to the victims' families.
So at this point, we'll move on to Major Peak, who will go into a little more depth, followed by Lieutenant Woolfolk, who will talk about motives as well as locations.
How you doing? My name is Major Carlo Peak. I'm the commander of the Major Crime Section. Just want to echo some of the things that Deputy Chief Hampton said, and the dedication, not only do all investigators with the city of Atlanta, but particularly since we're talking about homicide, our homicide investigators. There are a lot of sacrifices made, as Charles Hampton said, waking up in the middle of the night. But we see victims from all walks of life, financially, race, different cities, states, but their dedication to the citizens of Atlanta and to those that come and visit here, Atlanta, is exceptional. The hard work they put in is just great. Lieutenant Woolfolk, who leads that team, does a great job. One of the things, January was quite troubling for us. As you've seen the numbers go up, we have a rotation, and we went through that rotation in January. So we had investigators taking cases, and not only the homicides, you got to realize we have special death investigations as well, from suicides and some that are questionable until the medical examiner can rule otherwise. So this is a great team here. They're dedicated to the citizens and those in the city of Atlanta, and glad to highlight that today.
Lieutenant Woolfolk, you can go into what we're seeing, and if you can change the slide for me, Stan, we'll talk about motives and some of the locations where we're seeing crimes take place.
Absolutely.
Specifically homicides.
Yeah, and I think Chief and Major hit the nail on the head. I mean, the men and women of the Atlanta Police Department's homicide unit work just tirelessly and relentlessly to bring closure to the families and that are involved in these cases. And there is not a day that goes by that we do not internalize the work that sits before us. We see that as we see investigators coming in at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and working 16-hour days on cases. We recently looked at a study, nationwide study, that indicated on median there's about 146.7 hours that goes into a homicide investigation. In the Atlanta Police Department's homicide unit, there is no anomaly. These are the types of hours and the types of efforts that are put into these cases. So when you look at the work that these men and women have done year to date, and are sitting on our in-year solvability rate or solve rate being 58%, that's tremendous work is what we're off to this year. And then you look at our overall clearance percentage of 64% in comparison to the national average at approximately 50%. These men and women are truly doing phenomenal work. And as Major and Chief indicated, we're looking at what it has been thus far with our current rate of homicides up year to date. We're looking at about 3.5 weeks of the investigators until they come back up to the top of that rotation. So it is truly relentless. At 8:30, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, we are ready to come in and get that job done. Just from a data perspective, as Shada indicated, if you look at the screen here behind you, the numbers that are featured on the board, 33% of our homicides are attributed to escalating disputes. And I think that's important because we touched on the notion of conflict resolution, and that's essentially what we are seeing. These are isolated incidents, and that 90% of these incidents, these are people that are acquainted. When we arrive on scene, these are persons that are within that sphere of acquaintance, relationship, and as we begin to conduct the preliminary work that we do in conducting victimology and gathering all the information we need to move the cases forward, that's ultimately where our suspects lie in the majority of our cases. It's going to be somebody that individual knows, and there's a conflict that's taking place. So you see the numbers. If you have any questions pertaining to them, we can continue to go into them, but you see another 12% are attributed to domestic-related incidents. And then you see that 12% of them are attributed to narcotics-related incidents, but ultimately that number there, that 33% of being overall attributed to just escalating disputes. And then from a location standpoint, we know that 52% of our incidents in the city of Atlanta happen in apartment complexes, and that's troubling for us as a narcotics commander. There's preliminary work that we do upon arrival on scene, and we're asking for things like surveillance video and whether card in and card out swipe readers work at apartment complexes and what the lighting conditions are of these locations. And not to point any one location out specifically, but, we just came off of a homicide where there's no surveillance video that worked. It was extremely dark upon, detectives arriving in the night to investigate the case. And once again, this was an isolated incident. So, we take these factors, and we still, despite some of those variables, we're still able to have some tremendous successes in what the men and women of the Atlanta Police Department Homicide Unit are able to accomplish.
Now, Ralph made mention about lighting at some of the apartment complexes. It's important for your viewers to know and your readers that we do have Connect Atlanta. And with that, people have the option to register and or integrate their actual home camera systems. We are not monitoring them 24/7. It gives us access and it gives us permission to use it if there is a crime. So that is a special note as it relates to what Lieutenant Woolfolk just stated. We're gonna now move on to going into detail about those factors when it relates to the various factors, disputes, drugs, sudden anger. Can you talk about that now in a little more detail on what you're seeing?
Sure, and I want to go back to the conflict resolution piece. Some of these crimes are senseless when we truly get down to not only the motive, but when we get into the interviews and truly try to ascertain what happened leading up to these incidents. These are generally persons that they don't settle conflict well. We had in several, we can inquire about this 24 incidents we can talk about here. We could speak to whichever ones you guys want to delve into, but overall, that's the portion that I would like to focus on as from what I'm seeing from my vantage point is really truly the inability to manage anger and conflict.
Ralph, can you now talk about the incident from last night with the 9-year-old out at Richmond Hill?
Yes, so we responded last night to Richmond Circle at approximately 10 p.m. The 911 came up in reference to a 9-year-old that had been shot. And upon arrival, our officers did in fact locate a 9-year-old that had been shot and was pronounced deceased on scene. We were able to determine thus far in the investigation that there were 5 people in total inside of the residence at the time at which this incident took place, including the decedent. And we have further learned in the investigation after conducting several interviews that a 16-year-old that was present at the location is responsible for that incident. Now, we are still in the facets of the investigation, looking particularly at the physical evidence and the specific statements that we received on scene and trying to corroborate some of those statements to determine fact from fiction. We're looking at that now, and we're ascertaining whether or not there's any charges that need to be filed at this time. So we are working relentlessly to try to determine what's the right decision pertaining to charging in this investigation at this time.
And Ralph, can you provide any updates, Ralph, or Major Pete or Chief Hampton regarding David Mack, another child that was killed?
Sure. Absolutely. So, as Chief indicated, we go back to Nicole Smith in 1991, cold case that we just solved using genealogy and DNA. We never stopped thinking about these cases. The men and women of this unit are, some of the most elite, talented personnel from an investigations perspective that we have, and we truly internalize the work that we do. We come in aiming to bring closure to families, and I think that is a testament as to that 1991 case that we just solved. Is an example as we never let up, and the David Mack case is no exception to that. That is a case that we've continued to look at, and we will continue to try to bring closure to that family. In fact, I've counted at this point, there's 8 homicide detectives in our unit that have touched that case, that file. Those are members of some of the most senior experienced persons in our homicide team, in our cold case complex team unit. And then there's some of the younger detectives that have touched that file as well, and some of them that are intimately acclimated with the area in which this crime occurred as they operated there as patrol officers. So we looked at this even from a geographic standpoint, a neighborhood standpoint, is how could we touch this case from, the most intimate place possible. And we are continuing, we continue to have hope and faith that this case will be solved. I truly believe this case will be solved. We say all the time that crimes happen in seconds, but investigations take time. And this case is no exception to that.
Now, before we move to the next portion of conversation with the chief, because we will have an announcement, we're going to now take a moment to allow you to ask questions to our homicide commander, our major crimes commander, as well as the criminal investigation division deputy chief. So if you want to ask them any questions pertaining to homicides and crime, you can go ahead and do that now.
I know you were able to make an arrest in the 6-month-old who was killed last month. His mom is speaking today, just talking about how urgent a need for change there is. I know you all feel that deeply in terms of violence in the city, but how do you talk to a mother who's lost a 6-month-old to gun violence? It just seems so impossible to wrap your head around that.
I don't think nothing can compare you to talk to a mother losing a 6-month-old. I think the only thing you can do is have compassion and empathy, and just truly speak from the heart. The investigators on that case, we caught some good breaks in the beginning, and the investigators worked through the night to bring that case to a close real quick. What we'd like to say to the other families, as we talk about our cold case investigators, we never forget the victims. We continue to get Crime Stoppers tips, and we follow up with those tips. It doesn't have to come through Crime Stoppers. You can call the Atlanta Police Homicide Office. They will be followed up on. We never forget our victims, and we've shown that just recently with the cold case from 1995.
I think it's also important to, again, although we're focusing on the homicide unit, we can't do it alone. We rely on our field operations division, the officers on the street, where we distribute bolos for wanted people. The technology piece that Chief Bryant mentioned earlier, aggravated assault unit, our gang. So it's a collective show of force, especially when this 6-month-old child was shot and killed in our street. I mean, everyone was angry, and everyone did what they had to do to make sure that we came to a quick resolution. And then lastly is the community. We need and continue to ask for your support. We have Crime Stoppers where you can call to remain anonymous. But in order to end the violence, it's not just us. It's the citizens, the visitors, the business owners, the courts, probation, parole. As Chief Bryant said, our partners on either side of the table here. We're going to do what we have to do to keep the citizens of Atlanta safe. We're going to call on our partners who have stepped up to the plate to join a line with us. But that's what it takes to solve these cases as well. So.
No, I think it's clearly been hit. The points have been hit.
I'm sorry.
Pass the other one.
I'm sorry.
I got it.
No. I think the points have been hit, that we can't do it alone. Public safety, you'll continue to hear me say, public safety is the responsibility of not just the police department or law enforcement in totality. It takes the entire community to really have a hand in us making sure that we remain safe. We are the enforcement part of it when people fail to do what they're supposed to do. But we can't do it alone. And our community is so resilient. And so when you talk about what happened during that time, we had people coming up, leaving their jobs, giving us information because it was that important to them. You ask, what can you say to someone who's lost a child? That's not the natural order of things, and so it's difficult, as Major Peak stated. It's very difficult for us to get into that space. And so at that time, you start operating from your heart and doing what your heart tells you to do. And that's what drove I think, everyone as we resolved that case so quickly, is they were moved not by just mere emotions, just not by mere professionalism, but what their hearts told them to do.
When you look at the data for last year, 14 homicides in the first 6 weeks of 2021 versus 24 for the first 6 weeks of 2022, that's close to 50%. What do you say to people who are asking why?
Yeah, we're looking at those things as well. As it was stated earlier, what we're seeing is this, as we saw last year, the increase in escalating conflict, just conversational conflict, and that's problematic. It's problematic when you see people unable to resolve a conflict without going to weapons. That's an issue. Why we're seeing it this way, I don't know. We're seeing it in almost every major city the exact same way. I have a call later this evening where I'll be talking to a number of major city chiefs and the FBI on what we're seeing and what we can do to do it. The second part of this conversation that we're having today is to let you know exactly what we're doing in Atlanta to try to disrupt some of that. I think that, again, the commitment that you're seeing from us shows that we are truly committed to resolving these issues. We're utilizing every partnership, technology, conversation, relationship that we can to resolve the violence that we're seeing. But we know that the common factor in almost every homicide we have is guns. And over 90% of our homicides are with handguns. And that's a problem in itself as well. We have to be, as Chief Hampton stated, people have to be more responsible with the weapons that they're seeing.
Chief, I was actually going to ask you about guns. Are there any trends that you notice in terms of the guns that are used in these incidents? Are any of them stolen? Are they purchased legally? And are there any changes to laws that would help curb kind of some of just the proliferation of these weapons?
We just have to do a better job. Again, we see a facet of different weapons, both some stolen, some not coming back to an owner. But what we recognize is we just have to be more responsible. I don't want to get into adding more laws on the book. I think that what we have to do is just hold people that shouldn't have guns at all more responsible. We need to deal with them. That's the other common factor that we see. People who should not have a gun in their hand utilizing that gun.
Question for you, Officer Peak. Sorry. So on the mode of location, that escalating dispute that really stood out to me, 33%. It's almost more than double all of the other ones. You said a lot of times people who know each other. Is that all cases of people who know each other, or like what else makes up that category?
So that would be friends, relatives, people that know each other via social media. We see a lot of conflict that starts via social media. That would be in escalating disputes and known acquaintances as well.
So it's always somebody that acquaintances or people that know each other.
Yes.
In that category.
JD, did you have a question?
One other thing I was curious about is the city has this Cure Violence program, which is currently only an MPUV that aims to kind of resolve some of these disputes before they happen, and the mayor is helping expand it to other areas. Is that something that you all are tracking? Because it seems like it's possibly had some impact in MPUV, and are there other avenues for either the police to support that or at least track to see what kind of that pre-conflict intervention can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working with the mayor's office, the Atlanta Police Foundation, Cure Violence, to actually grow that out beyond MPUV, because we have seen some success in that space. As much as we're able to expand that, I think that it will have tremendous effect on what we're seeing as it relates to reducing gun violence in our city.
Now, before we move any further to the next portion of this conversation with the chief, I do want to yield to Sheriff Labat for his input and also allow for him to answer any questions as it relates to what he is seeing, because as you see, his Scorpion team is here, what they're seeing when they actually are out on the streets as well, because of the partnerships that we have, they see some of the same things we see. So I want to yield to Sheriff Labat.
Thank you. First of all, thank you. It is absolutely not just an honor to be here, but to be with Chief Bryant and taking this journey, right? So this is one, it involves commitment, right? Enough vision to say, how do we get in front of a lot of this? And one of the things that we started early on was Think Twice, Save a Life program. Right? We want people to understand that if 33% of these individuals, as Lieutenant pointed out, knew each other, right? Yet and still, the only way they decided to resolve that issue was through gun violence. We start from a position of being in a very poor position in the beginning of the conversation. So if we can get people to stop, think, before they pull the weapon out, and understand how many lives they change immediately by going through those steps, then we start impacting the conversation. And then the other piece that is very, very telling in and of itself, the fact that we had to start a Scorpion unit whose main mission is crime suppression tells a lot about where we are in society. And so these young officers go out every day with a singular focus of crime suppression. And with that in mind, we have to be very forward-thinking in what next steps look like. And so to that end, we have joined forces with the Atlanta Police Department and other municipalities across Fulton County to figure out how we can do a better job at just that, providing additional support, but and really taking the lead and having that conversation. So as we continue, a part of our communication, what you will see is our new Sheriff's app coming out. We've changed the mantra. We've joined with the police department about really see something, say something, but we're telling people see something, text something. Right? You can take a picture on the Sheriff's app. You can really send us the information, because the quicker we get the information, the quicker we can engage and really help solve some of these issues. But again, we have to get on the front end of this conversation. And so again, thank you, Chief Bryant and team, for your leadership in this space. So if there are any questions for me, certainly we'll certainly be here.
I saw you just deputized some APD officers, and can you talk about how important that was and how that partnership will work?
And that's huge, right? So Chief Bryant and I, from the time I was sworn in as sheriff, one of the things that across Fulton County we wanted to do was continue to create a force multiplier. And in such, and having those resources available to us, not just APD, so Sandy Springs, Roswell, City of South Fulton. Our goal is, if you're wanted in Fulton County, the wrong place for you to hide is in Fulton County, because we're coming to look for you. So we create this force multiplier to be laser focused on those that we already know have committed crimes. These are individuals that a judge has opined and said they're wanted, right? The warrant has been taken out. So what that also tells us is that, for instance, we have close to 1,500 warrants that need to be executed. Well, in that space, that means there are potentially 1,500 victims. And so we have to be very forward thinking about how we serve our community, and that us being able to deputize and create again that force multiplier allows us to even the playing field and to simply say, if you want it, Fulton County is not the place for you to hide.
Now we're going to move on to the next portion of conversation with the chief. We'll have an announcement regarding something we are doing with APD and in partnership with other local law enforcement. And they're going to discuss the announcement.
Yes, so thank you. One of the things as we talk about where we are in the space of violence in our city, we recognize that we have to be progressive in what we're doing. We also have to be more proactive than reactive. And so one of the things that we can do is interrupt other issues that we recognize contribute to the violence that we're seeing. And so under the leadership of Major Ricker, the anti-crime unit was created. And this is really a partnership, a more collaborative partnership, a more strategic partnership that goes strictly after violent crimes in the variables that create those spaces for violent crime. And so they've done a phenomenal job. The partnership currently is of Fulton County Sheriff's Office and Georgia State Patrol. And they go out and do a phenomenal job every time that they're out. And I think that for Major Ricketer to really give you all a more in-depth understanding of what the unit does and the successes since the creation of this more collaborative partnership will, it's really, I think it's paying significant dividends currently.
So good afternoon, I'm Major Ricker, I'm the Zone 3 Commander. So there's 6 zones in the city of Atlanta, along with the airport. And as each individual zone commander, you're looking at your crime pattern that's going on weekly. And having conversations between each of us, we noticed that how each zone kind of boomeranged into another zone as far as the same problems. So collaboratively, we decided to pool some of our resources to tackle that, where they wouldn't specifically focus on one zone, but everywhere across the city. And at the same time, I reached out to our partners. I reached out to the Georgia State Patrol, I reached out to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, and I also reached out to the City of Atlanta Corrections to see if they'd be willing to partner with us in that effort. With us kind of being the guide on where the need was, based on us reading crime weekly. And that was the important part, is to see where it was moving, see what locations it was affecting, and not focus on one part of the city, but look at the city as a whole. And that's our goal every week, is to touch every single zone. So luckily on our part, our partners agreed that that was something that they would want to get on board with as well. So we do have a weekly meeting. We put our focus out where it is, and then the collaborative effort is between the Atlanta Police Department and the folks that you see here. It's been going for 3 weeks, actually 3 weeks from today. During that time, 77 arrests have been made, which was good. But you look a little deeper into the arrests, which is more important to us. So some interesting things, out of those 77, 21 of those were for felonies. 23 of those people were already wanted. So that immediately tells us we're looking at the right locations, we're getting the right people. And just to give you a brief history of what some of these arrest histories looks like for these defendants, I'll go through them all. Murder, aggravated assault, armed robbery, burglary, auto theft, entering an auto, aggravated stalking, child molestation, and narcotics. So that tells you that the people that we are finding are the right people. Give you just a little bit more history. 24 of those folks out of those 77 had already been arrested for a felony. 21 of the 77 had more than 10 arrest cycles. And even compounding that, 13 of the 77 had more than 20 arrest cycles. So these are people that already are familiar with the criminal justice system. So I'm just thankful that we're out there, as one, and we'll continue to focus on this problem going forward.
So before we move on to the next portion, I want you to know that we do have pictures and information. It's going to be in your email, and it's already up and ready. It's ready for me to hit send. But before we toss back to Chief, I wanted to allow our partners, Trooper Burns and Major Butler, an opportunity to also speak to the success of this partnership and what you're seeing from your vantage point, GSP and Fulton County Sheriff's Office.
Good afternoon. I'm Major Damian Butler of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. I am the Special Operations Section Commander, in which the Crime Suppression Unit, our Scorpion Unit, falls up under my command. When Major Ricker reached out and asked if we were willing to partner with them on this venture, I was more than excited to do that. The Scorpion Unit has been in operation since July of last year. and they have already been hitting the streets doing these things. But one of the tools that we lacked was really being able to see the areas of focus that we need to really focus on when it came down to criminal trends or the crime trends, in which APD was able to provide that information for us. So the partnership has been very, very detrimental to the focus of the Scorpion unit, and definitely helped us to meet the mission of Sheriff Labat when it came down to fighting crime. As you see, within the past 3 weeks, this has definitely been a success. We're looking forward to moving forward with this, and I'm just really, really happy that we've been able to not just build the relationship, but also show that when it comes down to our partnerships, there's a strength in numbers. And once again, it's just been very, very successful, and I'm looking forward to continuing this partnership.
My name is Sergeant Michael Burns of the Georgia State Patrol. Our department is a support agency, so we're here to support any agency that needs our assistance for anything. We do have a dedicated crime suppression unit, so we're more than happy to have them assist along with the troopers assigned to the Metro Atlanta area to help with the Atlanta Police Department, Fulton County Sheriff's Office, whoever needs help, to try to get the crime reduced. We're more than happy to help.
Are there any questions for this portion before we turn back to Chief and conclude? Deidre?
Can you give us an example, perhaps, of one of the areas within the past 3 weeks that you all saw a problem and focused on, the type of thing you were going after and your results?
So I think this comes up quite often, and actually the picture's up on the screen now. So we have an ongoing issue with street racers, right? That comes up time and time again. So our corrections wagon just happened to be placed in a certain area in the city, over off Piedmont. And lo and behold, all of a sudden street racers started showing up. So he was able to radio to the rest of the group that, hey, for whatever reason, not paying any attention to me. And it resulted in a vehicle being stopped where the subject inside had narcotics as well as a stolen firearm. So obviously that's a success for that day. In another instance, in the shadow of the Georgia State football stadium, Fulton County successfully encountered another individual that led to a search warrant where a number of firearms were taken out of. Again, another success. We try to go all over the place, so we don't want to focus on just one location in the city.
Weren't these 4 agencies already working together?
We have obviously worked together in the past for a number of years. I think this is more of a focused effort where we get together in a schedule every week, and we know they're there and we know what we're going to tackle as far as those problems go. We certainly have done numerous details in the past, and we'll do that in the future, but I think this is kind of that on steroids, I guess you could say.
So the branding of anti-crime unit, that's the new partnership.
So I could put it to you this way. This detail is more specific, more direct in what their missions are. We always work with Fulton County, Georgia State Patrol. On almost any given night, you can see us working, addressing a variety of issues that may be playing out. One of them is street racing. And so we would partner specifically around street racing to address those issues. This particular unit is now going after more than just street racing. Street racing just happened to be one of the issues that they were able to address, but they're going after other areas beyond street racing. So the partnership, this unit is specific, whereas you will see our partnership cover more variety of issues throughout our city.
And it seems like it's mostly about putting units in specific places proactively, so there's just presence there.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we know as we monitor crime is that there are certain pockets in our city that contribute to crime repeatedly. These are generational issues that you will find in certain areas. And we are able to monitor how quickly those crimes are increasing or decreasing. But with that information, Major Ricker can deploy this unit to wherever he needs to address. Where street racing may be a problem up in Buckhead or in Midtown, he may be addressing a whole nother issue somewhere else in the city.
And about how many officers from each agency are part of this?
I don't want to go into specifics because I think that only helps the criminal element to know what we're up to. But there's a significant amount of resources from each group.
And I just want to be clear, so it's very fluid. It might be a particular type of crime that's being committed that you're focused on one week. The next week, it may be a particular area of the city where you're seeing an uptick in crime, so to speak, or something that you feel like needs to be addressed in that one area. So it's not just simply each week we're looking at a different part of the city and we're focusing on that.
Every week, we touch every part of the city. So that was important to us, where it's not just focusing on one location. And that's important to zone commander, is that each individual zone gets a little help. So we, as the zone commander, look and see what our problem is, and that's in turn where the focus is for that particular group in that particular area. And it changes daily. So it's not even something that's weekly, it's daily, yes.
All right, were there any other questions before we conclude?
Just one. You had mentioned that a lot of the categories of crime were down. Rapes are also up an astounding 236%, with 37 already reported in the first 6 weeks of the year, compared to 11 during the same time period last year. Is there anything you'd want to say on that?
Absolutely. So, I failed to mention that anomaly that we're seeing there as well. What we have attributed to, and this is the team to have that conversation with as well. Last year this time, you had some schools that didn't report in person. Many facilities that are required to report rapes just didn't have in-person people coming in there in person, and so they weren't able to do so. We are looking at that every week. We look at that regularly. What we can tell you is we're not seeing anything that was significant. There's no serial rapists. There's no particular area that we're seeing the increase. We just know that they are getting more reports, and many of them are delayed reports from people just coming back and reporting those incidences. But there's nothing that we can substantiate to say this is what we're seeing as it relates to rape, and we need to address it. We do partner with our schools. I think another thing that we're working with the mayor's office with is coming out and doing an educational piece with our nightclubs to educate them on issues where they're seeing where people may have too much to drink, or maybe something a bartender is seeing, and addressing and educating in that space as well.
So we're seeing a lot of them associated with alcohol. So what we're seeing, a lot of them are associated with alcohol, and men and women having drinks and at some point blinking out. We're also seeing an uptick of individuals meeting men and women, same-sex individuals as well, meeting on social media posts. I think what's important, we're also seeing some that are starting out consensual, and another individual wanting to stop, and that suspect just don't understand when a person says stop, that means stop. So we're seeing a lot of that, like I say, associates as well.
And just to piggyback off of that, I was curious too if it was like something to do with last year and things being closed, but even in 2020 there were 15, so it's like this year is really, would you call it an anomaly, or like, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
For rapes, even in 2020 there were only 15, and then 2021 11, and then this year 37 for this first 6 weeks. So it is really like unbelievable. Like what, I don't know, it's, they're just.
Right, and again, I think in 2021, things were even more closed. And we're more open now, and so I think that you have more people having more interactions with each other as it relates to meeting each other out at clubs and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think if you look at the comparison to 2019, it'll show that the trend is the same that we're seeing right now. So as Chief just said, 2020, 2021, dealing with the pandemic, things closed, and that's where we're seeing the uptick. And as Major Pete just said, I think we just have to go back to the basics. We all remember when no meant no, and we just have to remember that we're all human beings, and we have to get back to seeing one another as human beings. As we talk about this uptick in violence, that's, again, I think Sheriff Labat said before, it's this violence not only impacts the victim, but it impacts the suspect families as well. Because again, when we catch you and you go to jail for a long period of time, you won't have that loved one with you. And so we just have to get back to human decency, where we see one another as just true human beings.
Piggyback on the nightclubs, entertainment districts that you mentioned, Mayor Dickens said he plans to unveil some proposals soon related to lighting and cameras around nightclubs. Can you speak to that a little bit and whether, like, what kind of needs that would serve?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the mayor and his plans, but I think but what I can say, it is taking a different look at how the nighttime activities are being addressed beyond policing. What other measures you may put in place to disrupt what we're seeing?
I have a question on jumping back to the rape reports. Do you think that there necessarily are more rapes happening, or do you think people might be more comfortable reporting them?
I think clearly I know it's more people, and people are more comfortable with reporting them. I think that if you saw what years back, it was kind of frowned upon, but I think with the support that people are getting now, how we view it, that we have more people just willing to come up and speak out as it relates to it.